Welcome to Business Analysis Live. My name is Susan Moore. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And my name is Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. Thank you for joining us today. We've got an exciting topic queued up. We're going to be talking about ChatGPT and business analysis.
It seems like it's kind of a thing these days. I've noticed it's kind of everywhere. So I'm happy that we're talking about this because I think this has a lot of implications for business analysis professionals. But wait, there's more of our broadcast today, right, Scott?
Yes, we've been doing some research on our own, Susan and I, and really understanding the power of this tool. But we have a guest that's joining us today. His name is Amal. Amal, welcome. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you for having me on the show. My name is Amal Bariali. I've been a business analyst since about 2005, and I've been a business analysis consultant since 2012. You can click on my LinkedIn profile to see the projects I've worked on, and I'll keep it short.
That's great. So for those of you who have joined us live, please put your comments in the chat today. We will get to your questions as we go through. We anticipate a lot of questions today. And if you're listening to this as a recording, either on YouTube or on our podcast, we'd appreciate if you can give us a rating on our podcast. And if you do have suggested episodes that we can cover, Amal approached us through this. You can email us at live@iiba.org. Okay, so let's jump into this topic here. So just a little bit of context setting for those of you who haven't done any research yet on ChatGPT. It is part of AI, artificial intelligence, and it's a large language model, an LLM. We're not going to dive into the technology here. We really want to talk about the impacts of these tools. And GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, GPT. So we've been playing around with this tool, and Amal, you've been looking into this a fair bit. Tell us about some of your experiences and what you've seen and what you've shared on your YouTube channel.
Well, we have been, inside our community, we've been looking at ChatGPT since it was released to find ways of getting it to help us with our productivity as business analysts. And so we've run across a number of different tests. We've run a number of tests, and we've found a couple of use cases where it works well, a few use cases where maybe it's not as helpful. But overall, I think the overall summary, I think, of our findings so far is that I think it's a great tool to help us essentially boost our productivity, if I want to summarize it.
Okay. So we thought what we do is provide a very simple example for anyone who hasn't seen ChatGPT before. I'm going to share the video here, and it's pre-recorded because sometimes ChatGPT doesn't load for me. So I've got it pre-recorded here, and I'll walk you through the example here. So here we've got, this is the ChatGPT interface. And at IIBA, we've been looking at our menu system on our website. And on our website, we've been looking at what are those various menu items that we should be putting on there. So I've got a question here I'm asking ChatGPT to build a website. What menu items should be included? So you can see here it's starting to build a response. The list here says home, about us, product/services, contact us, blog/news, FAQs, reviews. We've also got portfolio, privacy policy, terms and conditions, and each one of these has a description with it. It does say at the bottom, keep in mind that you might need this customized for your website. So let me further refine that by saying, well, what should be included in a menu for a membership website? So ChatGPT remembers the context of the conversation, and it's adding more information here. Home, about us, membership plans, member dashboard, member benefits, events, community forums, resources, support, log out. So I'll ask one more question here about policies. What policies should be included in a website? So we'll see what it comes up with. It's thinking.
That is one of the things that I noticed. Sometimes you'll put in the prompt and it will think for a minute. So
yeah. So the list here it's coming up with is a privacy policy, terms and conditions, cookies policy, a disclaimer, refund policy, which is really important for e-commerce, um, shipping and delivery policy, copyright policy. So this was just a quick, very simple demo to give those of you who haven't seen this tool in action before insight into what this looks like. So in terms of the tool and as we've been using it, we've been experimenting a little bit, and I'll share one experiment I did 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, we had our broadcast, and I took the transcript of that, 4,000 words of it, dropped it into ChatGPT and asked it to summarize the episode, getting ready to publish the YouTube video. And surprisingly, it did a really great job at summarizing that text. So that's one use case of how this tool can be helpful. Amal, you've been playing around with it a little bit and trying different things. And what have you learned coming directly out of the tool?
I would say, I mean, just building off of the example that you just demoed there, one of the biggest areas I think that it's able to help us is in its ability to really do some creative work around the knowledge gathering that we need to do as analysts. So for me, very specifically as a consultant, oftentimes what I need to do when I'm going from client site to client site is that I need to learn very specifically about a specific domain that my client is having me deal with as part of the project. And that's really one of the areas where I'm really able to go to ChatGPT and start asking very specific questions about, explain to me what a salesperson does as part of their regular job in a large enterprise environment that is selling this kind of a product. And asking it those types of questions gives me a lot of insight into the activities that a salesperson performs. And
Okay.
that knowledge helps me to understand really my customer's world or my other stakeholders' world so that I can show up at the table with some more intelligent questions instead of really starting to kind of ask them details about, hey, what do you do on, in this part versus that part? It really kind of helps me with that initial discovery work
Yeah.
so that I show up at the table sounding way smarter than I really am, but most folks not knowing that I've done a lot of it through ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's the power of a tool like this. It's got access to so much information. It's able to summarize and sort of bring us up to speed on some, I guess, generalization of things.
Yeah.
But I guess the challenge is that we've seen and heard is that if you get down to some more of that detail, you could end up uncovering some things that are potentially misleading, wrong. There might be mistakes in there. It's not 100% accurate.
Yeah, and I would say even more so, I would say that, I mean, just based on a comment that we got on our YouTube channel, one of our YouTube followers actually saw a mistake that I made in one of our live demos where ChatGPT, I asked it a question, it gave me some information that was wrong, and I felt like based on my over-reliance, I just accepted what it had to say, and that mistake that it made actually slipped past me as well. And so I've been doing this again since 2005, and if it has that kind of an impact on me, I think that for folks that are just kind of starting out their careers, there may be a tendency for those types of folks to really kind of over rely on a tool like this.
Right.
But I mean, that example, I think, is a really clear example of how that can really introduce a lot of risks into whatever it is that you're doing. So
Yeah.
it certainly has its pitfalls. And again, I've learned it the hard way. We have a public video. It's a bit embarrassing for a professional of close to 20 years to make a mistake like that. But look, reality is what it is, right? And so if it
That's
can
right.
happen to me, I would say that I think it's a real issue that we need to look out for.
I think that's great that you left that in there, by the way, because I do think it shows, hey, if it can slip past somebody that's been doing this work for a while, then if you are new to the profession and you are thinking that, wow, this is a way for me to really get things done, just
Mm-hmm.
be aware you cannot take off your critical thinking skills. Actually, I want to share a comment that came through the thread. This is from Deborah. And this I think is another flavor of that risk that you're mentioning, which is some of that information can be generic, it can be incomplete. It
Mm-hmm.
only knows up to 2021. So there are things that have happened since that it doesn't know. And it could be used as the truth. And so I think those critical thinking skills that business analysis professionals bring, you need to apply that to the outputs of ChatGPT as well.
Absolutely. And I would say that I think ChatGPT has this habit of speaking with total confidence, which can make the situation much worse because for new users, a new user would go in and ask it a question, and I think the tone that ChatGPT writes with implies that it is so confident in what it's saying, which can make the situation much worse for new users who are just kind of getting acquainted with it, because you're much more likely to kind of accept it as truth without critical thinking. So that's a great
Yeah.
comment from Deborah.
Another thing that we've noticed it is good for is titling things. So for example, we produce YouTube videos, you do as well, Amal. You can sort of give it a general description of what a video is about and say, give me some topics, and it'll generate 10 suggestions, and maybe 8 or 6 of those will be good. So as a YouTuber, this is a tool I'm starting to use. I'm starting to use them to name our videos, and can use them for different sessions. So it's interesting to see that as well. Now, there have been some news releases in the last couple of weeks from Microsoft, from Google, and there's some important evolutions coming forward in the productivity software world. So let's chat about that for a little bit, just so people can understand where this might be going. So the tool that you've just seen is OpenAI's ChatGPT. Now, Microsoft and Google are using large language models and embedding them into their products. So what does that mean? Well, you can have your email drafted for you. You can have a PowerPoint assembled for you based on meeting transcripts, all the data the tool has access to. For example, Teams can pull all this data and put together a PowerPoint presentation for you. It's really interesting. I encourage you to check out a YouTube video on a topic like this, because it could really be an eye-opener. Another example is a spreadsheet. You can have a spreadsheet of data, and the tool can generate what are the top most meaningful things for that. So it's got the capability to start doing these mundane tasks that don't really take a lot of our intelligence, but they take a lot of our time to go through and do.
Yeah. Our time and our willpower, I would say, our mental stamina can get completely worn out by doing a lot of repetitive tasks that is really part of our jobs. And I think if I was to really kind of think about the big picture view of the impact that tools like this might have, I think it is a great opportunity for us to offload a lot of that, I think, mentally intense, but maybe a little bit lower value work onto a tool like this, so that we can kind of free up our thinking and our mental stamina to do real problem solving and do some real deep thinking that that our clients and our employers might be relying on us for.
Yeah.
We were talking before before we went live today. We were talking about a book called Deep Work. It's by Cal Newport. He writes a lot on productivity. And so there's this concept he has of deep work versus shallow work. Shallow work are things that are what we might call busy work, answering emails and doing things like that. And I think there was a study out there that said that could take up to 6 hours per day. 6 hours per day. That's a lot over the course of 5 days a week. So, how can Chat GPT or tools like it, tools embedded in other productivity tools that we use, how could that help us to become more productive, right? So to offload some of that shallow work, because the deep work is where creativity happens and real analytical thinking happens. And for those of you out there that are thinking, how would a business analyst use this? What does this do to the business analyst job? Then I think what it does is it enables us to manage some of these shallow work through something like a Chat GPT or an AI tool, and then really enables us to do the deep analytical work, which Chat GPT is, or any other AI tools, are just not primed to do. So yeah, so think about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, Susan. I like where you're going with that thought. Let's talk about what this technology can't do in the business analysis space. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it can't come up with brand new knowledge. it's really reciting back to you what it knows. And while you can include some of that information with your prompt, and I know we've got some comments about how do you write these prompts, you can provide it with that information and help you to do things like summarize it. But that's one of the risks. I think another risk is potentially you could be unintentionally plagiarizing because of the way that it puts these words together. It could be pulling from other sources. And I know we were talking again before our live broadcast today that potentially content generated through this model is not your own. It is not copyrightable, as it were, because it's being pulled together through this source. In addition, I think it's potentially inaccurate. It's potentially incomplete. I think those are some of the risks. And business analysis professionals, again, we've got the ability to mitigate those risks through our work. Yeah.
And I think that's where our opportunity lies, right? As analysts, I mean, it's right in the title of our profession, right? Business analyst. And I think that word analyst is going to become much more important, because as you start to kind of rely more and more heavily on AI tools, I think there's going to be a greater demand from our employers, from our clients, on their analysts to make sure that whatever AI is saying is firm, for lack of a better word. It's true, it's well thought through, it's answered the questions well, and whatever responses that we get, we have to, I think, through some analytical work, be able to explain the rationale for why this makes sense, because a lot of AI tools right now are really incapable of explaining why it's giving really the guidance, or why it's doing the speculation that it is. And I've pushed ChatGPT a couple of times, and it kind of reverts back when I ask it more deeply about, hey, why is it that you are suggesting these three things? And it'll start to rely back on really kind of default surface level answers without actually going through the rationale. So I think that's an opportunity for analysts really to do that type of actual analysis work. So I would encourage folks to start adopting these tools as much as possible. But if we were to look at a process of how we want to start leveraging these tools, I would say that the two areas for folks to start focusing on would be to make sure that you're very clear about the ask that you're making of the tool, because the way that you establish your line of questioning for AI tools really affects the outcome that it gives you. And once it provides its input, look at it very critically and vet it very, very well. And I think that if you start to build up those two skill sets and push a lot of the I'm going to call it grunt work, for lack of a better word, but push all the grunt work, let it do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and just do the deep analysis work on the front end and the back end. I think that's a really good strategy and a mindset to be in when approaching these tools.
Yeah, I came across a study by Cornell University. They're still in the process of it. I'll have Brenda drop a link in the chat. And they're starting to look, an early look at the impact of GPT on the labor market. In terms of roles that will be impacted, won't be impacted. Writers was one of the ones that seemed to surface at the top of this. But along the lines of what this tool can't do for business analysis professionals, they can't talk to people, they can't read body language, they can't understand corporate culture. There's a number of things that these tools can't do for us. So it's, in my view, a productivity gain for us. A tool that we can certainly leverage and we should embrace, but not something that can do everything that a business analysis professional can do.
Yeah, and I have looked a little bit into what Microsoft is looking to do with that. So if folks are interested, we could get into a little bit more deeper into that conversation. They're being a little bit tight-lipped about the details, but they've given us enough to give us some room for speculation on what it might actually look like moving forward.
Hopefully it's not as annoying as Clippy.
No, I think
do you remember Clippy? He was not helpful at all.
That little paper clip that would pop up on the
Yes.
Microsoft Word every time you try. It looks like you're writing an email. Yes. Go away. I
Yes,
would try
go
to shut it
away.
off
I
all the
don't
time.
need your
Yeah, I
help.
remember.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully it's more
Yeah.
helpful than Clippy.
So, Susan, why don't we dig into some questions? But I just want to share with the audience that this recording will be available on the IIBA YouTube channel today. So, if you want to share it with your friends and colleagues, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, actually, that is one of the questions that we've been getting. So thank you for that. Let's see. You know what? Because I have been trying to keep up with the questions, I'm just going to pop some of these in here, and we will see. All right. So first one here. This is from Mohammed. What is a business analyst? What does ChatGPT have to do with the daily task of an analyst? How do you guys want to answer that question?
I would say if I was, look, my elevator pitch for what is a business analyst essentially is that I essentially help my clients help them structure their business well, and then I help them design solutions to make sure that that business structure can operate well. I would say that that's a very brief summary of what a business analyst does. With IIBA's BA Book, I think lays out a very good framework for how to understand the tools, the techniques of how a business analyst does these things and what kind of tools are available to us. And so, I mean, that can be a whole workshop on its own if we need to. But at a very high level, what we're essentially doing is we're helping our employers and our clients figure out how they can implement some sort of a change that they're looking to implement so that they can operate well.
And so the chat GPT part of that is, I think a lot like any other job, whether you're in HR or finance or technology, a lot of our jobs just include these busy tasks, for lack of a better word, answering emails, putting together slide decks, researching particular topics. So I think the opportunity that we have with chat GPT, assuming we know how to form those really good prompts. And by the way, I think that's potentially a new skill set that business analysis professionals should lean
Good point.
into. Um,
Mm-hmm.
is that you can use AI assistance to complete some of those tasks. Now, again, as we've said here, I don't think that this is going to go out and it's not going to write your requirement document. It's not going to interview your stakeholders. But
Mm-hmm.
essentially, that's the opportunity that we see with Chat GPT and tools like it today. And I know, Amal, you mentioned these tools are evolving at a breakneck speed. It is fast. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
3 was out just a couple of weeks ago. 4 just came out. So who knows? 5 will probably be here. So I think that's maybe how I might answer that. Do you want to add anything to that one, Scott?
Yeah, I think the way I use the tool right now is more of a research tool. I had an example 2 weeks ago where our director asked me to look into something from a business perspective, a piece of software. And a technical colleague of mine was looking into the technical aspect. He had spent an hour and a half going through and trying to figure it out. I went to ChatGPT, typed in probably about 5 sentences, and got my answer within 2 minutes. And I jokingly messaged him back, got him on the phone, and said, "I just did all my work in 2 minutes." So it was a great way for me to very quickly understand I had no knowledge about and might have taken me an hour of surfing through the web to figure out, getting an idea of what this was all about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we
Yeah.
can get into some very specific use cases. I mean, I think we're probably at a bit of a high level for that conversation now, but
Yep.
in our community, I mean, I gave it our data model and I asked it to write an SQL query for me for a lot of the technical business analysts out there, and it came so close, so much closer. It essentially saved me a good 30 minutes of writing SQL on the
Mhm.
technical front. So it has a lot of those types of capabilities, but
Nice.
there are a ton of use cases for us to explore further.
Yeah, and we've been talking about it doing that shallow work. I know I had a question here, let me see if I can find that about this term shallow work. Shallow
Hmm.
work, by the way, comes from now Cal Newport's book called
Hmm.
Deep Work. So that's not something I made up. So if you want to learn more about what he defines as shallow work, Deep Work is the name of his book. But it can do uh, I've been experimenting with it. So for example, I've got my own blog, and I was asking it to create for me a month long social media calendar with key messages and social media posts and all that stuff. It was kind of an intricate prompt, and
Hmm.
it gave me a really good calendar of things that I
Wow.
could do and things I could work on. Yeah. And it was perfect for that. So I know we've talked a little bit about this, but I think it is a highly creative model. Amal and I have been going back and forth. I had a poem that I asked it to write about business analysis on in a mode of Dr. Seuss, and it was really good. Amal went the rap way, which is fantastic. Why didn't I think of that? We got a nice rap song out of it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so pretty pretty creative. It can do a lot of stuff. Well, let's see.
Hey,
Well, let's
hey,
get over.
Susan, I think as we wrap up today, maybe you should give us a stanza from that when we're ready for it.
I will.
Okay.
We'll we'll wrap that up. I've got something in mind. So let's see. So we've got this kind of a note here from Ruth. Great for building requirement templates, but you may need to feed it the information. Have you tried that use case, Simal?
Actually, yeah, and we have a video specifically exactly doing that. So essentially, we did a good, I think it was a good 40-minute to 1 hour session where I said, let's just start with a blank Word document, Chat GPT, and let's build ourselves a really good, high quality requirements template that we can use in our day-to-day work. And again, the result after about 30 to 40 minutes, I think was, I'm going to say very good is where I would put that. So it's a great comment from Ruth.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Good job on that CCBA, by the way. Always like to see that. All right, and let's see. Here you go. Here's a note from Sandra. I see it as guidelines or ways to shorten the learning curve. Ultimately, it'll be up to the BA to confirm the accuracy. 100% critical thinking skills, analytical thinking skills. You've still got to bring that. I almost think of this as, if I were to look in the Babok guide, this I would think of this along the lines of the um, documentation review technique. I think that's what it's called.
Mhm.
That's really what you're getting. You are just producing another set of documentation that you need to evaluate. So you cannot take this as as truth. You really do have to do the next step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to add to that very quickly, I would say that there is a task that we typically have to do, which is document production, but there's also a document review task that analysts have to do. I would say that based on what I've seen from Microsoft, that document review task may become much easier. Just like when Scott asked it to summarize the 4,000 word transcript, there's a potential here where the Microsoft's Copilot might start to train itself. Copilot is Microsoft's incorporation of the tool into their Office set. They're going to be able to train that model on a company's specific data set, meaning all of their documents, potentially all of their images, any emails that they have. And what that does is, as analysts, it gives us the ability to go in and say, hey, can you explain to me, based on this company's data set itself, up to date, can you explain to me how this process works inside of this company? And it'll really kind of give you a good starting point with that. So
Hmm.
if anybody from Microsoft is listening, look, I got a number of different use cases that I have on my wish list. If you're interested, let me
That's right.
know,
Call me.
and we can help you push it into the enterprise environment with some actual use cases for business analysts. So,
Hey, by the way, I wanted to just note
yeah,
Sandra is look at all those certifications. Wow. So good job on that one as well. Okay, so here's all right. So Evelyn, I used an AI tool to help me during a workshop engagement and found it useful. Oh, that's interesting. Have you
excellent.
have you done something like that as well, Amal?
I mean, I have it open. I'm using it for everything. So the minute you mentioned that book, Deep Work, I started to go to ChatGPT. So yes, absolutely. Anytime I have a chance, I might be ChatGPTing some answers to these questions that folks are asking.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like Google. Remember when
Yeah,
Google became a word? I think
yeah,
Chat GPT will become a verb as well. So
I think so
I
too.
guess
Yeah.
maybe that's the way it'll change us this year. Let's see. Here's a note from Mark. OpenAI is great, but the true power will be realized with the likes of Bing integration and the
Mhm.
utilization of Office 365. Yeah, I know that the first test maybe didn't go so well, but I do think they're going to quickly course correct.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
and
some
what I'll
great.
do is when we publish this YouTube video, I'll put a link in the description to some of those demos where you can actually see what these tools look like from a productivity perspective. I think the one I watched was maybe about 3 minutes, and it was, to me, mind-blowing, the
Mhm.
potential of this.
Yeah. I would say one very specific use case that I'm looking forward to is my ability to open up Microsoft Visio and say, based on my current client's documents and data set, can you please just draft me a current state process for a specific process? And it just lays it out for me in about 10 seconds. And now I've saved myself and my clients essentially about 2 weeks worth of work of having to figure that out on their own. So I got my fingers crossed for a feature like that.
That sounds compelling. I'm a little skeptical though, because when I put process diagrams together, it typically takes about 4 or 5 different departments to come together to
Hmm.
lay those out. A lot of
Yeah.
human interaction there, but hey, if we've got the information and the systems that can pull that out, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought this was an interesting question. I really need to know how it works for requirement validation. So you mentioned requirement reviews. It could help with that. What's what are how does that work? How about that?
I would I would say with validation, every time I have to do validation, that's where we really kind of shine, right? Because all of the work that we do up until the point of validation is us essentially eliciting the requirements, doing the analysis, documentation, more analysis. Validation is something that I don't think AI is going to be able to replace because that's where you actually need folks at the table to come with their true opinions, and it requires a lot of human interaction a lot of times, but it also requires a lot of critical thinking that AI may not necessarily be able to factor in. I find that with a lot of the client work that I do, that there is so much communication that happens that is implicit. Validation tends to be one of those areas where I'll put a requirement up on the screen and I say, folks, this is something that I'm going to be asking you to sign off on at the end of this session. And some people won't speak up, but the expression on their face tells me everything I need to know about how they feel about signing off on that document. And so I think that that's something that they're not going to be that we're going to need to focus on developing those types of skills a lot more.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Next question. There again, these questions and comments are coming in quickly. Um, Here's an interesting question. Let's see. There we go. Is there an AI tool where we can get wireframes? That would be a pretty cool tool. I don't know. I know that they are starting to build integrations into tools. I think I saw today there's an integration with Canva. There's one with Zapier. So if you're a Zapier user, there's some stuff that you can do.
No, I
What do
haven't
you
seen any
other kinds of
tools.
integrations into wireframing tools?
I haven't seen any specific tools, but I have a bit of a workaround in mind that I'm willing to test out if folks are interested. Because what I think we can do is we can get ChatGPT to put out some XML code that we can import into another tool, and that would create the actual diagram for us. So I haven't tested it yet, but I do have it on our backlog of tests that we're doing because Microsoft Visio allows you to open up a standard XML file that describes a process map. So even though that integration may not happen, we may need to do some manual work, some manual workarounds to get that kind of output. So it's on our backlog of things to test when we get
Ah,
to it.
I have seen an experiment that someone did, and they were asking a GPT model to generate a website for them to do a certain thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it actually generated the code that put together not just a mock-up, but a functioning website with a button that actually did something. It was
Wow.
really interesting to see. So it's almost skipping the intermediary wireframe and just saying, "Hey, just build it for me." Now, it wasn't a beautiful website, but
Mm-hmm.
it was a functional website.
Well done.
now there's another line of conversation happening right
Mhm.
now in our chat, and it's around privacy issues. And I know we haven't talked about that yet. Um, so, is there, because I assume that whenever you provide information into ChatGPT and ask it to evaluate something, that it's learning from that. It's including that in its knowledge set. Do you guys know anything about what's privacy concerns there might be around that?
Yeah, I think OpenAI themselves mention right on the screen when you log in to not share any personal information because that information is being incorporated back into their data set. And so I think that warning is up front and center, and it's definitely an issue that they have to be considerate of. And I think for a lot of companies that have data privacy policies, that's one of the things that have kind of given them some hesitation. I know that there are some companies that have told their software developers, for example, do not give this tool the code that we're using to build our proprietary software, because that information is now, we're not going to be able to really patent it or protect it from an
Oh,
intellectual
interesting.
property point of view. So
Wow.
there are a lot of those types of issues that I think are still floating around, and when we don't have any kind of resolution to them yet.
Hmm.
True. We haven't. I mean, we sort of talked about the copyright issues. We haven't talked a lot about the legal issues, and I'm sure at some point, watch. Keep a look at your calendar. There will start to be lawsuits around content generated through these AI models. So I think it is best if you are an organization that wants to use this as a regular part of your work to
Mhm.
have some policies around that. And if you're a business analyst, my 2 cents, if you're a consulting business analyst and you are working in different organizations, you need to fully disclose if you are using this because you could be sharing information that they do not want shared.
Mhm.
So I do think that's a real risk is just understanding that it becomes part of the public domain.
That's right.
Yep.
So there are a number of different topics that we could go on to. There's so much we could talk about here. I want to put out to our audience, if there is something you'd like us to dig deeper on, you can send us an email at live@iiba.org. We're happy to take topic suggestions.
Yeah. Do we want to take maybe one more question here?
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Let's see. Let's see if we what we can find here. There was one question here, and I don't know if I can find it, but it was asking about how business analysis professionals can build that skill of writing prompts.
There is an area that I actually teach. There's a subject that I teach called the line of questioning,
Mm,
LOQ. And what that
okay.
essentially does is it helps our students learn how to establish a line of questioning, much like a lawyer would before they go into the courtroom. And so anytime, I mean, I take a lot of my inspiration from the legal profession because they're usually very clear, rational thinkers. And so I think that if you build the ability to establish a line of questioning that is going to get you down to the level of depth that's going to address the issue that you're trying to get a resolution to, I think that's probably the skill set to learn is establishing a good, clear line of questioning and not letting the AI tool kind of take you down a path that that it might take you just on its own. And so
Okay.
oftentimes I find myself asking ChatGPT, hey, can you give me this? And it tries to give me a bunch of other things. I say, no, I want to know about this. I need you to follow my line of questioning here so that I can get to where I need to get to. So I think that's a great skill to start working
Mm,
on.
okay. Heavy duty interviewing skills. So I know we talk about that sometimes. So, all right. So that's one thing we need to beef up on then as business
Mhm.
analysis professionals. All righty. Well, Amal, thank you so much. We've had a
Sure.
lot of
Thank you.
questions today, and this has really been such a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. It's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And Susan, we've got an episode in 2 weeks, right?
we do. So let me tell you about that episode. We are going to go back to some techniques that we're going to talk about. Why use observation? Observation is a technique that you can use to do analysis. And so there you go. 2 weeks from today, so that's April 12th at 10:30. You'll find us back here at Business Analysis Live. Hey, before we go, I want to read you that last stanza of the poem that ChatGPT wrote for me about business analysis in the style of Dr. Seuss. So remember, my friends, in the world of business analysis is where it is. It helps us to grow and to thrive to make sure our businesses stay alive. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.